Izuku Midoriya is born in a world full of superpowers other known as quirks. Now, this world is different. Quirks or superpowers ranging from ones that can level buildings to ones that make you look like a washing machine. Well, children all around Japan would hope and pray for a quirk that can send them into the stratosphere of being like the number one hero, All Might. Now that right there is the goal of one Izuku Midoriya, but from a young age he's always felt the true side of being noble. It seems like deep down inside he's always been a good person, a stand-up little lad, and on top of that he holds all of what he holds dear to him to his chest. It seems like Izuku holds a lot of insane morality, and on top of that, it seems like Izuku wants to always fight for what he believes in. It seems like he's structured and serious, but at the same time understands the protection and the gratefulness of being around family and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Yes, at a young age, Izuku would be developing these ideas and developing all of these kind of heroic qualities all the way up until his quirk would finally awaken. And when his quirk would finally awaken and he would be told by the doctor what it is, it seems to be a bit abnormal. For starters, it seems like Izuku's skin is a little bit more durable than normal, but it also seems that he has an affinity with utilizing weaponry like swords, but also on top of that, when bonding with the sword or bonding with weaponry, it seems like it gets a massive boost to not only himself, but also the weapon itself. Now, this might include as well the armor he could possibly use in the future, but it would also involve utilizing just regular clothing. Now, he might not get any crazy bonuses from just utilizing regular clothing, but clothing itself does have small perks alongside it. Now, I will say this, Izuku at a young age, well, a lot of people would believe he doesn't have a quirk at all. Nothing too outlandish, nothing too explosive, nothing too crazy. And Bakugo would even test Izuku just a little bit, but he would soon realize that Izuku definitely has a quirk. Because when Bakugo one day at the young age of around 5 or 6, he would actually go to blast Izuku with an explosion. As he does, Izuku will put his arm out in front of him, and as he does this, it seems like this energy would emit from his arm, growing what seems to be a shield. This shield would block the attack from Bakugo and basically stop it in its entirety. Izuku would stand tall, standing and looking directly toward Bakugo, and this aura would emit off of Izuku that would make Bakugo respect him. It seems like his Night quirk is a lot more than you could possibly imagine, emitting this kind of aura that would force Bakugo to kind of see him in a different light, being that of respecting him entirely. Now, going on throughout middle school and throughout the younger years of his schooling, Izuku would be decent friends with Bakugo. And yes, Bakugo wouldn't hold the same moral standpoint and probably wouldn't be very similar to Izuku, but they would kind of be decent friends. Izuku would somewhat keep him in check, telling him that he shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that, making Bakugo grow up as a better person, at least to a small degree. Would he have that little flare of arrogance and that anger to him still? Of course. But Izuku would still be able to kind of make light and make friendship of Bakugo to a certain extent. And they are actually a pretty good tandem, a pretty good tag team. And it seems as if they both grow up together as respected friends and maybe even respected brothers to a certain extent. And both of them kind of rub off on each other in a way of Bakugo's arrogance would go down just a little bit, and Izuku's confidence would go up just a little bit as well. Izuku believes that he needs to follow this line, follow this rhythm, follow this path of being a true knight. Honor, nobility, all of this. But now he is exuding confidence that he wouldn't have had if he wasn't friends with someone like Bakugo. Now, when they're around maybe 14, 15, is when they kind of start training together, working out together, and also just learning hand-to-hand combat together. It seems as if Izuku is extremely susceptible to actually learning hand-to-hand combat. He's extremely good at protecting people and extremely good at just flat out going one-on-one with anybody you could possibly imagine. Now, when he would learn martial arts and learn the way of the sword and so on, he would be picking things up in a matter of days to weeks to months, right? Things that would take people years to learn, he would learn it all in just 1 year. That's the type of, quirk Izuku is able to gain. But there's so much more to his quirk than he could possibly even imagine. Something that he wouldn't even think about for a very long time. But for now, Izuku's mother, or Inko Midoriya, is able to get him, some basic armor, some basic things like padding, and that would allow him to protect himself, increasing his durability quite a bit. But on top of that, would also be able to get him a sword that seems to be his first true sword, and when he would grab it, it would bound to him as if it's connected to his soul itself. It seems like the sword is now connected to him and now will grow alongside Izuku Midoriya. When Izuku would put it down and go away, the sword seemingly would be like a magnet, attracting back to him. It seems as if Izuku cannot live without this sword and can always track where it is. This sword is bound to him, and eventually he would realize in a training session with Bakugo that when he puts down the sword, when Bakugo tries to pick it up, it no longer is able to be picked up by anyone. It seems like the boundness to the sword is based on the worthiness of the knight, and it seems as if Izuku holds the worthiness and no one else is worthy of it other than himself. And as time goes on, Izuku would continue on with his middle school studies and stuff like that, and eventually the teacher would tell them all, hey, we want to do a career aptitude test and blah blah blah. But then he would say that he knows everyone wants to go to UA High School, and there's two people here, Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo, that are actually trying out for UA, in which the class would be kind of confused. It seems like Bakugo would be perfect fit for UA, but what about Izuku? I mean, seriously, he doesn't really have that much to him, and from what they've heard, he relies so heavily on his weaponry. I mean, he literally has a sword holstered on his back right now that school had to basically get registered for him so that he can always carry it. And it's not like Izuku can basically blow up buildings or, shoot explosions and do this and do that. So they're very questionable about what Izuku can do, but Bakugo would tell them all to shut their mouths, that all of them are useless compared to Izuku, but Izuku would tell Bakugo that it's just fine, that being doubted is part of the journey, and that he needs to understand that, and every last person here needs to understand that as well. At the end of the day, you are going to be doubted, you are going to be challenged, and you are going to be tempted throughout this entire life. And you need to be ready for every last bit of it, because if you're not, then you might just fall straight on your ass. And that's exactly what Izuku believes. And of course, everybody would kind of shut their mouths, especially because both Izuku and Bakugo have shown over and over again that if you step up to them, they could definitely put you down. And that's just the facts of it. Even if they sit here and doubt Izuku on what his capabilities are, they still don't stand a chance against Izuku himself, and that's just the facts of it. Now, this would lead to them leaving school and, things getting shut down early, but Izuku would head off and continue writing in his journals about different techniques that he feels like he could work on, and a training regimen he wants to set up for himself in the coming days. And as he comes through this tunnel of some sort, Izuku would hear the crackling and the splashing of something underneath a manhole cover. And as something would jump out, it would be a sludge-like villain. Izuku would be shocked to see this and would be thinking, how the hell is he supposed to defeat this thing? He pulls out his sword, but then would see very quickly that there is no way that he's going to be able to, well, kill this thing with a measly sword. So he puts the sword straight into the ground, and the sludge villain laughs, saying that it seems like the kid's not going to resist and just, well, let him take his body. As the sludge villain would charge at him, Izuku would put his arm out as a seemingly what seems to be an energy-like shield would appear in front, as the sludge villain would smack right into it, unable to get to Izuku. Izuku says that the perk of being, well, like him is that he has very good hearing. And the sludge villain's confused at what he means by this, and Izuku says that it seems like someone has been chasing him, and whoever's coming to, well, get him must be stronger than him, because he is running like a scaredy little girl. In which the sludge villain would try to smash his way through this shield that was created, but Izuku tells him that there's no way to get through it, and the more he smashes into the energy shield, the slower and weaker he's going to get. In which the sludge villain is completely gasping for air at this point, breathing hard in and out, as he hears the manhole cover pop up once again and sees the person he's been fearing. And Izuku, well, he would smile extremely wide, as this person is All Might himself. All Might would Detroit smash the sludge villain into the energy shield, basically shattering the sludge villain into pieces, as the shield would then slowly but surely dissipate. Izuku would put his sword away, and he would bow toward All Might, saying that it's a pleasure to meet him and a pleasure to be in the presence of the #1 hero. In which All Might would ask if he would please consider, helping clean up here, in which Izuku helps out, and then All Might asks him what kind of quirk is he able to utilize, and what kind of quirk does he have, in which Izuku would explain his quirk, deeming it known as the Night Quirk, but also explaining what it can do, some of the capabilities, and what capabilities he has personally for himself. In which All Might would be extremely impressed by this. I mean, extremely impressed, asking, well, if he's ever considered going to somewhere like UA High School. In which Izuku says that he's going to be going to the UA entrance exam in about 10 months. So he's extremely excited, and he's going to be working hard and basically has a whole training regimen to get him ready for that test and ready for the entrance exam. In which All Might is happy to hear this. At the end of the day, All Might thinks that this kid has massive potential, but he tells him that he's got to get this sludge villain over to the police, but he will hopefully be speaking to him very, very soon. In which Izuku nods his head, and All Might would jump off and leave, as Izuku would head back home and would be excited to see what's to come. But what's to come truly for him right now is a lot of training. And that includes training with someone like All Might, or with someone like Bakugo, excuse me. He trains with Bakugo quite a bit throughout these 10 months. They would study together, train together, and so on, getting better and better and better, sharpening the skills of both of them. And Izuku, as he continues to get better armor and better kind of strength of weaponry, it seems like his sword continues to evolve with him. So much so that his sword seemingly is learning from the encounters that they have. The sludge villain encounter, seemingly his sword can now cut through sludge and kind of solidify the sludge itself, seemingly leading to his sword learning even more. And this is what I meant by his sword is developing and learning alongside him. And it seems like his sword is going to be even more powerful as they go on. Now, the training regimen between him and Bakugo, it's nothing crazy, but it's also nothing to laugh at. It's very difficult training in terms of working hard and working out and getting sharp enough for the UA entrance exam. But Izuku, well, he wouldn't get that many other powers and other things like that. And he is awaiting getting new armor and a new suit and stuff like that, because in his eyes, if UA High School can give him better armor, a better suit, maybe a cape, maybe look like that vintage All Might that he wants to look like, but on top of that, give him the armor of a knight, maybe with the colors of All Might, maybe the kind of the facial cover looking similar to the facial hair of All Might in a way, something similar or something reminiscent of that. Maybe it could give him the strength that he seeks after. Maybe it will give him the bonuses that he seeks after. That's what Izuku wants. So he's going to have to wait for that when he gets into UA High School. But it all starts with the UA entrance exam, which him and Bakugo would eventually show up to. Him and Bakugo would sit through a speech from President Mike and sit through this and that and then do the written portion of the exam. After the written portion of the exam, it would be the practical, in which they would be separated and be told that they're going to be taking on robots. 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, but also there is a 0 point robot that they should just avoid, in which Izuku is excited to see what's to come, in which Izuku lines up ready to go, and let's just say when at the gates ready to move, he gets interrupted by somebody by the name of Tenya Ida, in which he tells him that he's not supposed to have weaponry and this and that, and Izuku tells him to mind his business because this weaponry has been certified and is bound to him through the Knight's Code, and that he needs to stop disrespecting the blade that he holds and the blade that he wears like clothing and like an arm itself. And of course, this would shock and kind of spook Tenya Ida just a little bit. This guy takes his whole persona a little too seriously. That's what Tenya's thinking. But Izuku doesn't see this as any persona. This is him. He is the knight. And of course, he tells him once again that he needs to mind his business as he basically gets his sword ready in a position for him to run. As the gates would sling open, he would take off in a blaze of glory. He would slice through many robots, and as he slices through them, he would even throw his sword, slicing and puncturing through multiple at the same time, a robot shish kebab, if you could even say, and he would slice through them repeatedly, and everybody would be in shock to see this guy running through, clean slicing seemingly through all of these robots. But it seems as if his blade is leaving a different kind of puncture every time. Now, for the robot specifically, it seems like his blade is heated, as if it's some sort of explosive heat that is on the blade. It seems like when he makes contact with the robot, it slightly explodes and it allows him to cut clean through the robots, in which this is a gift from Bakugo. Bakugo, for training with Bakugo and being hit by his explosions, has had the effect of an explosive like sword on the sword itself, right? The sword now has a melting / fiery like effect depending on the circumstance, allowing him to cut straight through the robots with massive ease. But also, he does cut through the robots as well. As he does, it would liquefy the parts of the robot as if it's kind of making it into sludge, destroying the robot from the inside out, crumbling it to pieces. It seems like Izuku's every encounter has benefited him massively, no matter the circumstance. And as he cuts through robot after robot, he dismantles them all, or at least a large portion, and everybody is in shock to see what he's capable of, and the teachers who are watching are just as shocked as the students. But soon the 0 point robot would appear, and Izuku would stand right in front of that 0 point robot, and as he hears the screams of a girl, without even a second thought, Izuku would stand tall in front of the robot. He would stand there and place his sword in the ground, and everybody would be completely confused. Doesn't he need that sword to protect the girl? Like, what is he doing? The sword is what makes him strong. The sword is the reason why he's able to do the things he can do. But soon they would realize how wrong that is, because Izuku's sword would begin to emit power, and so would Izuku himself, creating an aura of a giant shield, what seems to be. And as this giant shield would appear, the robot would walk into it, but would then ricochet right back off of it, slamming itself right on the back on its backside. Seemingly, what happened was that, well, the robot would punch or kind of have this momentum land on the shield. And then the shield itself would use the momentum and shoot back a wave of energy right directly back at the robots, slamming it down to the ground, and the robot would be out of commission entirely. Izuku would pull the sword out of the concrete that he shoved it into, placing it back and sheathing it back on toward his back, and then he would go toward the girl that was, completely under rubble, helping clear the rubble and lifting her up and carrying her to safety. It also seems that when protecting somebody, he also gets a massive bonus in his strength. It seems like Izuku's abilities really derive not from one-on-one combat necessarily, but from protecting others that cannot protect themselves at that time. Izuku would help her out, get her to safety, but before she could even say another word, Izuku's already gone. Just like that. Like literally in a second, Izuku is disappeared and has already gone off on his own to basically see what he should be doing next. He meets up with Bakugo. They speak about what they did and what was happening and so on and so forth. And they argue just a little bit at who's going to be number one. But nonetheless, they would head home, and as weeks would go by and the letters would come in, it seems like the number one and the number two were solidified. But it seems as if Izuku Midoriya got the leg up on his friend Katsuki Bakugo because of one portion of the exam nobody knew about, being that of the hero or the rescue portion of the exam, giving him the leg up on Bakugo just enough to peak him by 5 points. Honestly, Bakugo was extremely fast at destroying robots, and he actually had more robot points than even Izuku himself. But Izuku's rescue or hero points is what put him over the edge and allowed him to be the number one in the class. And this would excite both Izuku and Bakugo, but annoy Bakugo because he wanted to be number one. But still, this would lead them both to Class 1A, and as they would head over when the first day of UA would start, they would enter the classroom to see people that were all different, right? Some pink, some giant, some weird looking, some scary, some anything, right? Everybody was a little bit different, right? And they would both sit down and await the arrival of the teacher. And as everyone laughs and does this and does that, Izuku would be just staring underneath what seems to be the podium of what we eventually will know as Shota Aizawa. But Izuku would ask why he's laying there, and of course Bakugo would be confused and ask what the hell is he talking about, in which Izuku would point out that Aizawa has been laying there that entire time, and he tells them all to shut up and to get ready because they're going to all be tested to see what they're truly capable of. In which Aizawa would take them all outside and they would begin what's known as a Quirk assessment test. This Quirk assessment test is a pretty basic one, and it only shows minor things. Your raw strength, your raw speed, how fast you could do this or that, or how strong are you with this or that. Nothing crazy. So yes, the number one student would go first, but Izuku would throw the ball and it really wouldn't go that far. Maybe 150, 200 meters, nothing crazy, right? At least in the eyes of what Bakugo would eventually do, which is quite a bit more. And everybody would be completely shocked by this, seeing that the number two student seems to be more powerful than the number one student. But Aizawa would remark that it seems like they're as dull as the last group because it seems that they all forget that raw power is not the only thing that matters, but is the only thing that they're testing for at the moment, at least to a certain extent. They would do the speed test, the side steps, the grip test, and all of the above, and eventually they would get their scores back. And Izuku would score pretty damn well, right? He would be at least in the top 10, probably the top 7, and he would score really well because he's fit, he's fast, he's pretty strong, all the above. But at the end of the day, he's not overwhelmingly good in everything. And what he's really good at is with a sword, is really good at with fighting and protecting and stuff like that. That's where his strength lies. But right now, he's unable to show it. And, well, it seems as if Aizawa would threaten that whoever got the lowest score they would be kicked out and basically exonerated from UA, completely expelled and gone in an instant. But of course, this was a little bit of a ruse, because the next day when they're going on to their next training session, the other person that got kicked out, being that of Hagakure, would be literally back the next day, and it was just a temporary expulsion. Now, this would lead us to the first Heroes versus Villains training, and this Heroes versus Villains training would include somebody that many would not expect, being that of All Might. All Might would be here as a teacher, ready to teach, saying his signature "I am here," and he would tell them all to get on their hero outfits or hero suits and get ready for some training. Now, Izuku, he would get on his hero suit and outfit, his cape flowing and his mask put on, and he would don the suit that looked very similar to All Might, but very knightified, you could even say. It looks very similar to a knight's clothing or knight's armor, but at the same time looks very modernized, but also added a little bit of features from the one and only All Might, right? Now this right here would give him massive bonuses to his durability, even to his strength, and also a connection between this armor and the sword would massively allow him to basically control whatever fight he's in. Now, this is something that Bakugo would not be thinking of, especially because it's going to be Izuku and Ochako versus Bakugo and Tenya Ida. And Bakugo would still want this 1 versus 1 on, well, Izuku Midoriya, wanting to show that he is truly better than him, at least one-on-one, and he's going to show him right off the bat. So when Izuku and Ochako would run out, 5 minutes were over, and they would go in with the goal of touching the bomb. They would go in, and Izuku would tell Ochako to go find the bomb because he has a fight with Bakugo ready to go, in which she would be confused, but soon they would see, well, the one and only Bakugo blasting down the staircase, and a fight between Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo is about to unfold. But this fight would not be a fair one in the side or toward the side of Izuku Midoriya, because Izuku would have this armor that would allow him to walk through the explosions that Bakugo hits him with. The durability and the understanding and the evolution of his quirk through protection and through his own one-on-one protection, and also his morality and his moral code. It seems as if he now is resistant to Bakugo's explosions, and he would then strike Bakugo with the kind of like a dull side of his sword, hitting him toward the wall and slamming Bakugo once again back into the ground. He would then tie Bakugo up and tell him that he's a formidable foe, but at the end of the day, they know each other way too well. So when this, and he points at his armor, when this appears and things change, well, let's just say you're at a massive disadvantage. In which Izuku would go to walk away, and Bakugo would tell him that that wasn't honorable at all. In which Izuku would look at him and tell him that that's the most honor that he could give him. Not holding back, not evening the playing field, giving him his utter and true respect and his utter true all is the best honor he could give his brother, Bakugo. In which he would nod toward Bakugo as he runs up the staircase, in which Bakugo would just sigh, looking at the ceiling, and shake his head. That guy is freaking annoying. In which Izuku would run up there, seeing obviously Ochako struggling a little bit to touch the bomb, but with the help of Izuku and the kind of the speed and the distance closing that he can do, and really just the threat of Tenya getting hurt, which would be, Izuku is very threatening. So with that threat, they would be able to kind of capture the bomb, and then the training session would be completely over. In which All Might, would be extremely impressed by this. At the end of the day, this was one hell of an accomplishment, and they did a hell of a job overall. But there's so much more to be done in this world and in their experience through UA High School. And that right there would include the USJ. The USJ would be their first taste at rescue training But the rescue training would flip on its head and flip to something completely different, because when villains invade, Izuku's might, his strength, and his honor would be tested for the first time ever. His true resolve would be unveiled, and his true resolve will be tested. But that is for the next part of What If Deku Had a Night Quirk. Izuku Midoriya is about to take on his next challenge. Now, with his entire class, they would all head off to the USJ. But the issue is, well, Aizawa's not too fond of him taking his sword. Aizawa basically tells him that since this is going to be rescue training, he really shouldn't have his sword on him, at least for the moment. That it's going to be pretty heavily anchored toward flat-out rescue, like, you know, based on environment and stuff like that. But Izuku tries to tell him, like, this is important. Like, he's going to need his sword, that he should have it. 100% he should have it. In which Aizawa tells him, do not bring the sword or else. In which Izuku shrugs his shoulders and he says, fine, I won't bring the sword. And as they head off on the bus to the USJ, let's just say that it's going to be really good that Izuku doesn't listen very well. Because when they head in, meet Pro Hero 13 and all that good stuff, eventually, well, villains would come pouring out of portals, and that is where things get really sticky. Because these villains are here to actually wreak havoc, and all of the people there, that includes people like Izuku and the other classmates, are pretty damn scared of them. But Izuku is ready for a fight, in which Aizawa tells them all to kind of stay back and tells Pro Hero 13 to protect the students. But Izuku, well, let's just say he's already jumped into battle. And guess what he has? His sword. Izuku begins to absolutely dismantle everyone there. Of course, not killing them, actually hitting them with the dull side of his blade, or kind of like smack him with his hilt if need be. He doesn't want to, you know, stab or poke or kill anybody. I mean, you know, that's not the way of the knight, and that's not the way of a hero. So he begins to absolutely obliterate these people, knocking out most, if not all, of the villains pretty damn quickly, and that's with the help of Aizawa. And on top of this, Aizawa is benefiting from Izuku being there, being that Izuku is pretty damn good in a fight when he is alongside somebody, and it kind of gives him the same effect as protecting somebody. They do actually try to send Izuku through a portal, but as the portal would open up, Izuku would slam his sword on the ground, blocking the portal entirely. As he blocks that said portal, he is then confronted by Shigaraki. Shigaraki would look to grab Izuku immediately, but Izuku would parry off Shigaraki and would avoid basically being touched by him. But as Shigaraki is basically mouthing off and telling him that this stupid kid is really messing with his plans, well, let's just say a Nomu would smack Izuku from the side, blindsiding him and actually shelling off part of his armor, at least the armor he's currently wearing underneath his clothing. As this is shelled off, Shigaraki would tell him that he's really just going to basically lose here. And as the Shigaraki says this, he picks up a piece of Izuku's armor and he begins to disintegrate it in his hands, in which Izuku smirks as he sees this and says that he really shouldn't have done that, because now that he knows what he's capable of and now that he knows what he can do, well, let's just say this isn't going to go as well as he thought. In which Izuku would try to get to Shigaraki to close the distance, but the Nomu would show up once again, stopping it. But Izuku is able to fend the Nomu off, or at least fend him off to a certain degree, stopping the Nomu from actually, you know, hurting him very, very badly. He stops the Nomu and begins to cut at different parts of the Nomu to try and kind of dismantle or disable him. But it seems like the Nomu is extremely durable. But as the fight goes on, Izuku's blade gets even stronger, even to the point where he can actually cut through the Nomu's skin. As they're fighting and as him and the Nomu are going blow for blow, Aizawa is just making sure that Shigaraki can no longer utilize his quirk to basically disintegrate Izuku, which is definitely beneficial, even if Aizawa is pretty damn upset at the fact that Izuku is doing what he's doing. Izuku would then eventually land a critical blow to the Nomu, stabbing his sword through the Nomu and cutting it out the side of him. As he does this, it leaves like this sludge-like effect that would harden just slightly to the point where the Nomu can no longer regenerate that part of his body. Izuku would smirk slightly as he knows that he really has now gotten the upper hand, and as he thinks that he has this upper hand, someone else is about to arrive and sway this fight even more in the favor of the heroes. All Might would come busting through the door, and everybody would stop and stand still in complete shock. A lot of the villains are already kind of dismayed and knocked out, and now Shigaraki sees that they have All Might. All Might would come through and absolutely batter the Nomu, and exposing the weakness that basically Izuku has now exposed, right? All Might would then get the upper hand and eliminate or defeat the Nomu pretty swiftly, and as well, Shigaraki thinks that this is his go-ahead to leave ASAP. Izuku would try his best to stop them from leaving. Shigaraki about to walk through a portal, it seems as if a barrier would show up and block Shigaraki from actually leaving. Izuku grabbing Shigaraki, slamming him to the ground, and basically pinching his clothing to the ground with his sword, creating a sort of shield-like bubble that prevents any portals or something like that from kind of getting through. Bakugo would come out of nowhere as well, getting a hold of Kurogiri. And as he gets a hold of Kurogiri, he restricts Kurogiri to the point where he can no longer use portals. All Might would see this as an opening and knock out Kurogiri and then even knock out Shigaraki. It seems that the villain's plan was not ready for someone like Izuku, and not ready for the things that Izuku was truly capable of. And they were able to capture both Shigaraki and Kurogiri. At least that's what they thought initially, because, well, let's just say another portal would go beneath Shigaraki, one that would actually ignore Izuku's property of his own shield, and it would get rid of Shigaraki. But before Kurogiri could be taken as well, everybody would grab onto Kurogiri, basically unwilling to allow him to leave. As they seize Kurogiri entirely, someone else would show up through the portals. As he rises through the portal, well, let's just say this is the first appearance of All For One. All For One would show his face, and Izuku would stare him down intently, extremely focused, and Izuku would basically put his sword back in his kind of sheath of some sorts, or kind of his holster. As he does this, he looks at All For One, and All For One questions who exactly this is. Who is Izuku Midoriya truly? In which All Might would stand beside Izuku, and All Might would exclaim that he's the one that defeated the League of Villains, or this little villain crew that he decided to throw together. This kid right here is the future of being a hero, and that even All For One will fall short very soon. As if he just gave the stamp of approval to Izuku Midoriya, but this stamp of approval will mean so much more than you could possibly imagine very soon. Because All For One would kind of look at them and decide to cut his losses, as maybe he looks at Shigaraki as someone who, if he can't handle this simple task, that he should just leave him in the dust forever. As well, he debates with even kind of throwing Shigaraki back at them, but he decides that he's going to give Shigaraki one last chance. As he leaves through the portal, leaving Kurogiri, believing that that's a lost cause, at least for now, that he would leave and everything would go quiet, as the other villains would be completely knocked out and the other heroes would eventually arrive to seize the rest of the villains. Now, there's a lot to be done and a lot to be said. Because, well, let's just say Izuku is going to have a massive question that is going to be asked to him. Something that he would have never expected in the first place. But for now, there's some time between, well, the USJ incident and the UA Sports Festival, so Izuku continues his training and working extremely hard. As he's training though, All Might would approach him and begin to speak with him about what his capabilities are and what he can truly do, in which All Might would tell him that, well, he has someone he wants him to work with like ASAP, especially after the UA Sports Festival, but he also wants to ask the kid something else, that he believes that he is trustworthy. He believes that he holds honor and also nobility within himself, and he wants him to actually pass on, well, the power of All Might, or known as One for All, onto the kid of Izuku Midoriya. And Izuku would be completely shocked by this, thinking that this is insane. What is he talking about? Pass on the Quirk? I mean, how is that even possible? You can't do that. But of course, there would be an explanation, and they would talk about it. But All Might says that he wants to inform him first because he doesn't want to grant him the powers just yet. But after the UA Sports Festival, they will speak more about it, and he wants them to all speak, well, with Sir Night-Eye, in which All Might says that he's going to have to suck it up a little bit because, well, him and Sir Night-Eye are not on the best of terms, but Sir Night-Eye will need to speak, including Izuku and one other person who, well, Sir Night-Eye vouches really heavily for as a really good candidate, in which Izuku nods his head as he says that he'll keep this on the down low and keep this completely quiet, and that it comes from the heart and that comes from his code, and he'll make sure to hold on to that promise forever, in which Izuku would leave, continuing his training all the way up until the UA Sports Festival. Now this is where things do actually change quite a bit, because Izuku himself, well, let's just say he can't utilize his sword and the armor that he has, so he is a glorified kind of super like human. Now, is he useless? By all means, no. Izuku is a trained monster that could really, in hand-to-hand combat, beat quite a few people. But in terms of just being as useful as he normally is, probably not as much. Now, the obstacle course race, he definitely wouldn't even be close to the first place. I mean, he would probably be, somewhere in the top 5, maybe top 10. He would easily pass. He would be up there with the best, but he wouldn't be as quick or as fast as some of these other people, especially without some of the gear that he's used to having. And the only thing he could really utilize at the moment is some sort of magical shield. Now, that's about it, at least for now, but still, it is going to be very useful in terms of going on to actually be in the cavalry battle, which the team he would go or be with would be actually one that is pretty damn strong, and would be a big reason why he would actually get into the next round, because he would actually join up with people like Bakugo and Bakugo's team, being that Bakugo and Izuku are on very good terms and basically like brothers in arms. Them two would work perfectly together. We're talking they would be easily grab a ton of headbands, and they would make it look extremely easy as a unit. Now, Bakugo would take a lot of the glory there just because Izuku is only kind of like a strong man in a way. He's the person that will be carrying most of the people, but in terms of protection, he's able to use his magical like shield to block other intruders from getting in. But that's literally it. In terms of his offense, he is vastly lacking in his offense in terms of just striking power. If he had his sword, it would be a different story, but also people would probably get massively hurt. But this doesn't mean he won't win the cavalry battle. He just will need massive help from someone like Bakugo. Now, this would lead them to the first 1 versus 1, and that first 1 versus 1 would be, well, Izuku Midoriya versus Hitoshi Shinso. Now, this is an awkward one, because Izuku would get information about Shinso, about his whole like mind control business. Now, Izuku sees that Shinso is in the general studies, and a win over the #1 student in UA, or the #1 student in Class 1A, would be a big thing for Shinso. But Izuku is not going to give him that easily. He wants to fight. He wants to see what he can do, and let's just say Izuku is vastly upset about the skills that Shinso portrays. Shinso claims to want to be a hero, claims that the only thing that restricts him is because his quirk isn't flashy and good. But Izuku would beat him down like easily, parrying and dodging and countering everything Shinso ever would shoot at him, and not even saying a word. Izuku would just be disappointed. He would throw Shinso out, and he would tell Shinso that he had his own ideas. He thought to himself, maybe he should allow Shinso to continue on. Maybe. But the disrespect that Shinso has on the hard work that someone like himself has put forward. Yes, he was blessed with a quirk that is extremely beneficial, but don't get it twisted. He would say that a lot of his power, a lot of his strength, a lot of his quirk comes from his use of a sword, his use of armor, his ability to fight. That's where his power comes from, and his hand-to-hand combat was all honed from day one. Since he was little, he did this. Since he was young, he did this. He worked hard, worked out, he trained his fists, his legs, everything in the way of combat. And it seems like Shinso has not done a single thing. Izuku would shake his head and say that, yes, he's going to probably fall next round, being that next round he faces Todoroki, but that is no excuse for him to not give it his entire all. And he tells Shinso that if he wants to be stronger, wants to be better, maybe he should learn to fight with his fists just as much as his quirk. As Izuku would walk away, he would be getting prepared for the fight with Todoroki. Bakugo would approach him, telling him that he better win because he wants to face him in the finals. In which Izuku shrugs his shoulders and says that with his sword, with his armor, he probably would win. But right now, he's not too concerned about winning or losing, just not at the moment. In which Bakugo would be frustrated, but he knows Izuku. He knows how he is, and he knows what he holds, all the morals that he holds, so he must be saying that for a reason. Now this would lead to Izuku walking into Endeavor, in which Endeavor would tell him to get his son to use his fire side, and that, well, he would basically benefit from doing so, and that Endeavor would do this, or, gift him this, and Izuku would tell him that just because he's a shit father doesn't mean that that Izuku has to feel obliged to actually help him. That if he's going to help anybody, he's going to help Todoroki because, well, that's just who he is. Endeavor is absolutely heated at hearing this, but Izuku would just ignore anything else that was said and head out to the stage. Izuku would face off with Todoroki, and immediately when the timer was up, a giant iceberg would appear, and Izuku would shield off the majority of it, bashing his way through. As he does this, he continues to feel the onslaught of the ice over and over again, but he's slowing down massively. Izuku would tell Todoroki that he is so much more than just that one side, that he is so much more than just his ice, right? As Izuku continues to get battered by the ice, he can feel his body adjusting slowly but surely to the ice itself. The slowness of the ice that was originally making him feel sluggish and slowing him down no longer is affecting him as much, and Izuku's speed is beginning to amp up as he skates across the ice, breaking through it easily now as he gets to Todoroki and slams him to the ground. And in a spurt of kind of chaos and needing to kind of conflict with whatever Izuku is doing, let's just say Todoroki blasts him with fire, and it's on accident. He does this out of a need. Izuku would get sent flying back, burnt extremely bad on one side of his body as he stands up and he brushes himself off. Part of his face is scorched from the fire, and part of his body is actually kind of frozen over by the ice. The ice begins to shell off his body, but the burns remain, and Todoroki looks at him and thinks that he is a monster. Like, what is he doing? He's fighting as if this is life or death, in which Izuku says to him that, well, someone like him, well, he'll never understand the motivation that he has. He'll never understand the motivation that he has himself as a knight. He'll never understand what the blade means and what the armor means to wear. and that's exactly what he's going to show him. He charges forward, but as he does so, ice and fire smack into him extremely hard, and it seems as if Izuku is fading and fading quickly. The judges and even Cementos look to see if they should call the fight. Midnight about to do so as well, but Izuku stands up once again. The scorches begin to kind of show down his body. The ice completely worn off. Only singes and burns can be seen now. And Izuku continues to walk forward like an absolute Terminator. As he walks forward, though, ice and fire smack into him. And Izuku walks forward more and more and more, blocking partial with his magical shield. But even the magical shield is not adjusted to the fire and ice that is protruding. As it continues to smack into him, he walks and he finally approaches and is right next to Todoroki. Singes on his face and body, ice falling off of him as well. He's right in front of Todoroki, and he grabs Todoroki by the shirt and he tells him that he was pretty good. As he collapses and falls to the ground, Izuku Midoriya is knocked out cold. Everybody rushes through to get him, aid as soon as possible. And when Recovery Girl gets to him, and basically they help him out and get him to the nurse's office and so on and get him medical treatment, he actually recovers pretty quickly. It seems his body has a factor of durability, and it seems to get adjusted to the ice and the fire. But the fire itself, let's just say it was a little bit too much and too overwhelming at the same time when his body was adjusting to both the ice and the fire. When adjusting to the ice so heavily, it was making him extremely weak to the fire, and unfortunately he was unable to last long enough to actually overcome what was facing him at that moment. But as time would go on, and as the UA Sports Festival would come to its climax, and as Bakugo would stand on top of the podium, he would be upset, unable to face down his rival or his brother, quote unquote. But he makes it very clear that if Izuku wanted to win, if Izuku wanted to utilize and could utilize the blade that he holds, the one that is an extension of himself, that nobody here would have stood a chance. There's a reason why he was the number 1 student, and there's a reason why he still is. Bakugo showing respect that nobody would ever have expected, and frankly, Izuku is the only one that he shows that respect to, in which Bakugo would take his number 1 prize and raise it up in the air, but at the same time would know that in an actual state of a fight, Izuku has one up on him, motivating him even more to get better at whatever he needs to get better at so he can keep up with his rival. Now this would lead Izuku to actually going off to Sir Night-Eye's agency for a bit of an odd internship. Now Sir Night-Eye meets with him, and he's not too fond of Izuku, seeing what Izuku did and how it wasn't really calculated. But Izuku tells him that how dare he say it wasn't calculated. It was. All of it was. Everything he did was all thought out and based on his own morality, that he can never tell him that he didn't think it through. And as he's arguing with Sir Night-Eye, Mirio and All Might would walk in and tell them to, basically calm down. In which Izuku would nod and he would basically be quiet. And as they would conversate over something that Izuku wasn't really thinking about too much until right now. And that is the transfer of All Might's quirk to either Mirio or Izuku Midoriya, in which they're both shocked to hear that this is the conversation that they're having, in which Izuku tells them that if Mirio is the candidate, if Mirio is supposed to be the next hero, up-and-coming hero, and he deserves it, that he should have it. But of course, Sir Night-Eye, yes, would agree with this, but Mirio would butt in and say that even All Might has given this kid, basically Izuku Midoriya, the stamp of approval, that they should not ignore that Izuku's strength has been proven time and time again, and they saw what he can do, and they saw what he can do without his weapons. What do you think this could do for him now? In which Izuku would tell him that whatever decision that is made, he will take it and he will embrace it no matter what. In which, well, of course, Sir Night-Eye would not like that answer at all, because he wants, of course, Mirio to don the power of One for All. But Sir Night-Eye slowly but surely kind of gets used to Izuku as they conversate and train together over the next day or so. And eventually All Might would decide his successor. He would tell Mirio that he is powerful, that he is the next and up and coming, that he is going to be the next #1 hero. And he tells Mirio that he's going to give him the power, in which everybody is, well, somewhat psyched about this. Izuku not really saying much, but at the same time, Izuku's not too worried about it. But Mirio would then tell him that he'll have to decline, in which everyone is confused. But Mirio would tell them that he had a quirk that was extremely difficult for him to use. Something deep down inside has told him that his quirk kind of rejected him in a way. So maybe he should give it to someone like Izuku, whose quirk is practically bonded to him. His quirk has been perfected to him. Maybe that would basically give the best results. I don't think that giving the quirk of All Might, One for All, to someone who had a quirk that was so difficult to learn, that rejected with his body so much, probably isn't the best idea in the world. So it's decided. Izuku Midoriya, the Knight hero, or maybe even to a large extent the Holy Knight hero, is about to gain the powers of All Might. So how does he gain the powers? He has to eat a piece of hair from All Might's head. Yes, very odd, very suspicious, and very weird. But as he eats the hair, and some time would pass, about a day, the powers would show themselves, and Mirio, well, let's just say he would be pretty damn smart about what he said, because it seems like One for All is now binding with Izuku's Night quirk extremely nicely. Because when Izuku would awaken, he would see that he may not have his blade next to him, but as he puts out his hand, it seems like a blade would appear very similar and reminiscent to the one that he has, like the physical one. And then when he looks to his side and he puts his arm out, a shield would appear as well. It seems as if One for All has bonded in more ways than one, and has now allowed him to truly project the weaponry and also just the armor that he has and the armor that he likes to wield on his body through the use of whatever One for All is giving him. And on top of that, well, let's just say it has given him strength beyond belief. When Izuku begins training and begins to work out and fight and train against Mirio, it's obvious the strength difference. It is obvious the speed difference. It's absolutely insane. Izuku is feeling at an all-time high, and maybe the idea of him being this one and only knight figure might actually be the truth, because this man, this guy, this student has now transcended his quirk and his power beyond belief. But as they're fantasizing about what he could possibly do, what his powers could do, and what he can do entirely, some bad news would come over the intercom, and bad news would be transferred over to the phones at Sir Night-Eye's agency. It seems that Tenya Ida has fallen victim to the hero killer, and there was nothing that could be done, and it seems they have lost their students and also their friend and classmate to a severe, well, lapse of judgment. But for now, it seems that Tenya has passed on, but the hero world and Izuku's class and Class 1A and UA High School in general still needs to move forward in his name. But for now, that's where we're going to end off part 2 of What If Deku Had a Night Quirk. Izuku Midoriya heads back to UA High School after the internships of some sorts with Sir Night-Eye. Now, this is a different time for the students of UA, because they're dealing with the loss of someone like Tenya Ida. They lost their dear classmate, but to be honest, Izuku has never been super close with every classmate that they have there, and he wasn't super friendly with Tenya, but he still feels kind of the weight of the death of Tenya Ida on the shoulders of himself. He feels like he needs to show up in a different way now. He needs to better himself and be a bigger and better hero in the near future. Now, they do have a lot to go into and a lot ahead of them, and well, that includes the kind of the final exams that they're going to have. Now, the written portion of the exam is pretty basic for Izuku. It's difficult, but he's studied up and he studied well, so he's able to pass through that portion. But the real challenge is going to be the final exam, the practical, and everybody initially believes that it's going to be against robots, but that would actually not be true. This exam is not against robots, it's not what they think it is actually against teachers, and it would end up being a shocker when Izuku realizes that the person he will be going against is actually All Might. Well, it's Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo versus All Might. So Izuku is excited to test out his new strength, his new abilities, and his new power. Even so much so that he's ready to take on alongside one Bakugo. But this is when it will be revealed that he is stronger than he could possibly imagine. More than you could even believe. Because when they would walk through those gates to take on All Might, the connection between the brothers in arms, being that of Bakugo and also Izuku Midoriya, it seems like their connection and their brotherhood is going to carry them through this more than they could imagine. Because Izuku and Bakugo would face off with All Might, and yes, they would barrel through some of the attacks that he would throw at them, but when Izuku reveals his new powers, reveals the strength that he holds, appearing with a spectral-like sword and a spectral-like shield, Izuku would then look toward Bakugo as this aura would stretch out toward him as well, seemingly connecting and bonding with Bakugo, seemingly right on the front lines of the field. And it seems as if Bakugo and Izuku, when they charge toward All Might, they have a combined unison power that is even stronger than All Might himself. It is shocking. It is completely takes everybody back at the fact that these two are going toe-to-toe with All Might, and it seems like Izuku is even putting All Might on the back foot. And All Might can only smile as he realizes that this right here, Izuku Midoriya, was the perfect successor to what he wanted to do. The person who could truly take on the mantle of the #1 hero in the future. This is the Almighty Knight, Izuku Midoriya, standing alongside Katsuki Bakugo. But it seems like even Bakugo is drastically stronger from the enhancement of One for All. It might sound insane and it might sound wild, but it seems as if there's a connection between Bakugo and Izuku that is giving Bakugo this immense power, his explosions enhanced, his speed enhanced, and his physical capabilities enhanced. This aura would surround them both as they clash with All Might, leading to eventually All Might having to yield and All Might having to wave the white flag, saying that he gives up. Yes, they made All Might, of all people, All Might, the #1 hero, quit. Now, yes, it isn't a technical quit, of course. It's not like it's some oh, you're too weak, you have to quit. Of course, he is a little bit weighted down and stuff like that, but nobody here is trying to kill each other. So All Might felt that they deserved the win. Yes, it could have been stretched out. Yes, they could have pressed their, strength to another level and tried to, continue on with the battle. But Izuku decided, or All Might decided, that it was time to call it quits for himself and time to allow the two boys to have the victory over him. In which they're excited about it, they're happy about it, and Bakugo even questions Izuku about the powers that he showed. And honestly, Izuku is hesitant. He doesn't want to tell Bakugo just at the wishes of All Might, but he does speak with All Might not too long after, saying that Bakugo is someone who wouldn't say a word, and on top of that, that is his brother. That is his brother, and he saw the connection they had out there on the battlefield and on the fight against All Might. Then All Might, he decides to clue him in, because it does seem like Izuku's power did shift over to Bakugo in some way, at least when they were on the forefront when fighting together. So they do conversate about it and talk about it, and of course Bakugo is a little bit frustrated, saying that he wishes he could have deserved the power like that, but he gets it. He understands. Now, is he upset and is he frustrated that he wasn't strong enough? Of course, that's what Bakugo is, but that just means Bakugo is going to work harder and he's going to just be better for it. Now, this would transition them into the Forest Training Camp arc, and the Forest Training Camp arc would be pretty basic and pretty similar. Now, you would get a lot of time where they're just flat out training together, working hard, getting stronger, getting better, and Izuku's getting more of a grasp on his abilities and his ability to fight. But as this is occurring, eventually they would learn of something happening, being that of a villain-like invasion. But this villain-like invasion isn't what you think it is. It's nowhere near the invasion it was initially, but this one is solely dedicated to trying to take and kidnap Bakugo. So when Izuku goes up the mountain to help Koda and make sure that Muscular doesn't lay a finger on Koda, and, well, let's be honest, beats the brakes off of Muscular, and he absolutely dismantles him, being that Izuku's way more well trained, and on top of that, he is way more prepared, especially with his blade and his spectral blade being able to land critical kind of damage, being that of like different slices to different parts of the body, or even cutting off limbs if need be. But of course he wants to, refrain from doing that, because he doesn't want to, force anybody to bleed out or anything like that, or even kill somebody. So he's trying his best not to, just avoid the catastrophic event. And he would, of course, protect Koda, but as he protects Koda and finishes up that fight, he would realize the whole forest, well, it's settled down. It's calm, it's relaxed, no one's speaking, no one's moving, no one's freaking out. Well, that's because they already got what they wanted. They got Katsuki Bakugo quicker than normal because they didn't want to fight any of the kids. They didn't want to kind of go one-on-one. They didn't want to kind of face off with any of these students this time around. They wanted one thing and one thing only, and that's Katsuki Bakugo. Now, All For One is questioning why, or basically questioning kind of where Izuku Midoriya was, and it seems as if that they did have Muscular occupy him for a while, but All For One even says himself that he wanted Izuku Midoriya as well, seeing that his power, his strength, and his quirk would be extremely useful for them. At least to his knowledge, it would be useful beyond all means. But they weren't unable to get him, and he would have just been kind of like an extra token. Bakugo, on the other hand, is someone that they want to turn to their side, but soon they're going to realize that that is not the case, and there's no way they're going to get Bakugo on their side. Now, this is when they come up with a bit of a plan to save Bakugo. You get some of the students like Izuku, like Momo, and many others to go and basically save Katsuki Bakugo. But Izuku tells them that they need to give him the radar and he will go save his brother. And it's that simple. He doesn't need them. He doesn't need help from them. He doesn't want to put them in harm's way. He needs the radar and he'll go. But a lot of them refuse to allow him to do this. They tell him that if they give him the radar, they are tagging along. But Izuku tells them that if he has more people to protect, there could be multiple versions of this that go extremely bad. But they even say that isn't he stronger when protecting people? Isn't he better when there's people on the line, when they fight alongside each other? In which Izuku gets a little frustrated hearing this, but then he reluctantly agrees, saying that they can come, but they need to be sharp and they need to be concise, that they need to be smart about everything they do, because things can go really wrong really fast. And well, he was right. because things go really wrong really fast. Because when they go to try and save Bakugo, things start spiraling out of control. Explosions, heroes trying to save Bakugo, and the arrival of the one and only All for One. Now this is when things are drastically going to change, because Bakugo is being held kind of in place in a way by a lot of the League of Villains. Now, no Kurogiri is a bit of an issue. No Kurogiri is going to be massively an issue for a lot of these people and a lot of these heroes. It seems like Kurogiri actually being kind of away or taken away, but Shigaraki being there is going to kind of put the villains on the back foot, especially when Izuku shows his face. Because when All for One and All Might begin to clash, Izuku comes barreling in from the skies, slamming on the ground, creating a shockwave that boosts Bakugo into the sky, and Bakugo blasts his explosions all the way toward Izuku, landing next to him as their aura, or his aura, would begin to intertwine with Bakugo, and once again the duo has been reunited. And this time, they are fighting true villains. They are not fighting someone like All Might, not someone they idolize, but people they despise. Izuku and Bakugo would swiftly knock out most of the villains there. People like Shigaraki and all those people, all of those villains that are there, especially the minor ones, are going to get knocked out very quickly and subdued very quickly, and Shigaraki would even be incapacitated extremely fast as well. Izuku would look at Bakugo and look back up toward All Might as they see All Might losing the fight against All for One, or at least at this moment. They would both go over and start clashing with All for One, and this is when things would be an absolute shock. Because when everything settles, when Bakugo, Izuku, and All Might stand tall and stand there staring at All for One tells them that it doesn't matter what happens here. It doesn't matter if they win or lose, because they will all just lose at the very end of the day. In which All for One would say that there's no way that he loses against them. That even his mentor's mentor lost, and they always lose. In which Izuku puts his sword into the ground, his spectral-like sword, and as he does, a mist would come over the ground, and it would completely change the area. The area seems to be different, clouded and shrouded in kind of this odd white mist, and as this happens, these kind of spectral-like figures would show up, one after another. People that he could not recognize, people that he did not know, but he knew deep down inside that they were connected in some sort of way. Izuku would watch as these people would kind of sprout out of nowhere. It seemed like a woman, and then another one was a man, and then a man, and it was odd. It was extremely odd. But then All Might would realize that these people, they're familiar. They're people that he should know, until he looks closely at one of them, looks closely at one, well, of the users or one of the people there, and that was Nana Shimura, someone that All Might knew very well, and someone that was the mentor of All Might himself. In which All Might would be in complete shock at this, like, how is this happening? What is going on? And then he realizes, one after another, as they string along, all the users of One for All, every last one of them, stand with them. And All for One is standing there in complete shock, borderline shooken, borderline shaking. At the end of the day, he was not expecting this, and even he could not predict that this would occur. All the quirks, all the powers, and all the strength all combine as they all basically blast and just obliterate All for One in one foul swoop. And All for One lays there completely out of commission, borderline on death's door. And as everybody would come in, swoop him up, and take him away as the hospital, and as they would shove him into an ambulance, as they would cuff him and so on, it seems like the last little embers of his own life would slip away, and there would be no more All for One at all. Not a single sliver of breath with it. And then the League of Villains, who lay there unconscious, and all the villains that were there at the incident, swooped up, taken away, and thrown in prison. But as everybody is swooped away and thrown into prison, as everything seems to be calm, as everything seems to be tame, they would hear something in the distance. They would hear rumblings that were getting louder and more aggressive, as if the ground itself was shaking, like an earthquake was quaking, as if there was something as strong as cement breaking through the ground as it ran. And as it approached, as it got closer, it looked like a mountain was approaching them, about to destroy the entire city. And this was Gigantomachia. Gigantomachia was on a trigger with All for One's last breath. It seems as if when All for One would pass away, Gigantomachia would rampage through the city to avenge his master of some sorts, and it would be another issue for the heroes to deal with right now. Izuku would get ready to fight as the spectral-like users of One for All would begin to barrage this monster. But it seems as if even Izuku cannot necessarily damage or crucially damage this monster to a large degree. Everybody would try their best. Powers and quirks and so much overwhelming power. No moves would be released to even occupy other heroes. All Might's already on his last legs, in which Izuku looks at All Might and tells him to stop, to not fight anymore, at least for now. To let him take over, to let Bakugo and him take over, and as they would fight, the other spectral users of One for All would stop. They would look toward Izuku and watch him and Bakugo fight with the Gigantomachia, trying to slow the monster down, even with their enhanced strength. But they would look over to All Might. As the last embers of One for All would be disappearing, they would reach out. They would reach out toward All Might and basically show them their hand. And All Might would reach toward Nanoshimura's spectral hand as he grabs it, and he can feel a surge of strength, a surge of power, as if he was once in his youth again, and as if his power has been regained, at least for the moment. He would dash up toward the boys, being that of Bakugo and Izuku, standing next to them. All Might would be in a complete glowing state, but at the same time it looks as if he is in his prime All Might outfit, and they would stand tall, the three of them, striking down Gigantomachia with one giant sword slash, with an explosion from the left side and a United States of Smash from the right. Gigantomachia would be shoved toward the ground, and everybody would try their best to restrict him and hold him, being that of Izuku would slam a giant spectral sword through the back of Gigantomachia, one that doesn't hurt him necessarily, but would restrict him massively, trying to contain this monster, trying to contain him so that he no longer is a threat to the city and to Japan itself. Izuku holds him still, as well Midnight would come out of nowhere and would begin to use her pheromones, and they would try to enhance them as much as possible to restrict him even more. Anything that could possibly use to restrict him. Cementos, the wrapping and the thread, as much as possible, surrounding him, containing him, and everything to restrict him. And eventually he would fall slowly but surely to sleep, and Gigantomachia would be restricted and would be gone and would be done for good. At least would be available to be put in prison and will not run amok the way he just did, threatening the entirety of Japan. But as Izuku and Bakugo gasp for air as they are tired and drained, and as the aura would dissipate and Izuku would sit on the ground with Bakugo. As they would sit there watching everything that occurred, they would look to their right as they see All Might. But it's not the one they would believe it to be. All Might in a spectral form would begin to fade. All Might would look at them and say that he will always, always be right next to them on the battlefield. But now, he no longer is the hero he once was. And he hopes that they can carry on that mantle for them. As he dissipates and as the users disappear, they all go back within the spectral sword of Izuku Midoriya, and he would stand there. And Bakugo would be in shock as tears would run down both of their faces. Their idol would just have given his life to stop this giant behemoth of a monster, not having power left within him after the fight of All for One, having to give him his life to the sword and the blade of the knight, truly allowing Izuku to be the almighty knight. But as the city calms down and as things settle down entirely, everybody hears the news of All Might. Funerals and celebrations of life would be enforced, and everybody would settle down. But Aizawa would remind the students of UA that there's always something coming ahead of them. That their journeys as heroes are not over. And some, well, they may have sped up their path to hero. They may have sped up their path to being something that they could only possibly dream of, but they all still have to follow the same pathway of being the hero that everybody believes this world deserves, and the hero that everybody believes this country deserves. And of course, they watch as, well, All Might would be set away and gone, and the celebrations and the crying would be over. And now it would be time for their hero journeys to continue forward. Because yes, Izuku and Bakugo would be punished for falling out of line and doing what they did. But the world, or the entirety of Japan, the civilians and everybody else believe that they showed more capability than even heroes themselves. And they decided to give them the push that they deserved. And that was a provisional hero license, accelerating them quicker and further than anybody could imagine. Now, the duo of Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo will have to carry on the name of the one and only All Might. Will they be able to properly do that? Will they do that to the degree that All Might would hope they would do that for, or the degree that they believe, or that All Might believes they will do so? Well, you're going to have to find out in the next part, and possibly final part, of What If Deku Had a Night Quirk. Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo already have their provisional hero license, and they're ready to take on whatever's to come. Now, normally Bakugo goes on to his own little internship and stuff, or work study and stuff like that, but this time around he actually is intertwined more with Izuku Midoriya. So he decides that he's actually going to be going to Sir Night-Eye's agency as well, based on the request of Izuku Midoriya, and luckily it's not too big of a deal. It's actually not a hard task for them to acquire, or not a hard task for it to happen. So Izuku and Bakugo both go to Sir Night-Eye's agency, and this is when things kind of go on to learning about the one and only Overhaul. Now, Overhaul is someone who is the leader of the Shiha Hazaikai, a very dangerous person, and on top of that, they actually make a drug that changes or completely erases quirks entirely. Now, there also is something that they are tampering with that enhance the power of a quirk, but more specifically, they want to find this Overhaul person and shut things down ASAP. Because if they don't, well, a lot of people may just be hurt and may actually be dealing with some pretty dire consequences if they don't find out who this person or where this person is ASAP. So they're going to be dealing with it entirely, or going to be dealing with it for the most part at this moment. And they begin patrolling and going on different expeditions and stuff like that to basically figure out what's happening or what's going on. And they don't really learn a ton until one fateful day where Izuku and Mirio Togata, other known as Lemillion, go on a bit of a, well, excursion or a patrol themselves. When they go on a patrol themselves, they actually find out, and stumble across actually somebody that would blow their mind. And this would be Overhaul himself. This would blow his mind, or they would be completely taken back at the fact that they stumbled across him, and everybody is kind of trying to figure out what they should do, or more specifically, Izuku and also Mirio are trying to figure out what they should really do, because how should they approach this? Should they really just try to take him down now? Maybe they should avoid doing so, because there is a little girl that's known, or that her name is Eri, and it seems like she is very, very afraid, almost deathly afraid of Overhaul, but also deathly afraid for both Mirio and Izuku. So should they really decide to conflict with Overhaul right here and right now? Probably not. But Izuku, something deep down inside of him is telling him that he needs to basically take on Overhaul right now and shut down whatever is happening and whatever is to come. So when Eri would come over toward Izuku would actually, play it off like nothing's happening, like, oh, asking if she's okay, asking Overhaul, he gets it, children can be rambunctious from time to time. And as Izuku basically is saying these things, he would reach out his left arm, and as he does, he puts a giant wall between Overhaul and also Eri, but that would also include Mirio and himself. As this wall would appear, Overhaul would try to react to this, trying to react and stop this from occurring, but the wall would press against him, and as he would turn around, he would see that some sort of force field would kind of be surrounding him. He would touch the force field, trying to basically get rid of it entirely with his own quirk, but it seems like his quirk is entirely disabled, unable to actually utilize it. Izuku tells Mirio to get Eri out of here, like right now, because he's going to hold Overhaul here for as long as he has to do so. He's going to hold Overhaul for the entire time until the police and other heroes come. Izuku tells him that it's truly unfortunate, at least for him, that he ran into the wrong person. That honestly, it really does suck, at least for his master plan or whatever he's trying to do, that he ran into him. That he ran into, and points out himself, Izuku Midoriya. Now, truly, he doesn't care about Overhaul's feelings, or, maybe feelings of regret for coming here unannounced, or maybe even allowing this little girl, or other known as Eri, to get away. He doesn't care about any of that. Frankly, he deserves everything that's coming to him, and honestly, if he wasn't honorable at all, he would slice Overhaul in half right now and end whatever is to come before it even starts. Overhaul is completely shocked and completely taken back by this, and he tries his best to push through and tries to get through this barrier and this force field, but he literally can't. Everything he tries, every single last bit of it, he even tries to destroy the ground or do something, but it's as if he's in like this tiny little box, as if he's completely caged away and unable to move. And eventually other heroes like Sir Night-Eye would approach, and they would be completely shocked at this, thinking that they were able to capture him so easily. But of course they're going to need some help, because it's not just Overhaul who's somebody that they're going to have to deal with. It's not just Overhaul. It's going to be the entirety of the Shiya Hazaikai. Of course, that includes Overhaul, but they're going to have to deal with them as well. In which Overhaul tells them that he's not going to tell them a single word, and that they're not going to figure out a single thing, and that his wishes and his ideals will still be carried on. But of course, when things like this are being talked about, and when they are basically conversating about this, well, Sir Night-Eye says that there is no other way around it. That they're going to find this base of theirs, and it's going to be over in just a matter of seconds. in which he's thinks that he's bluffing, saying that there's no way he's going to find where they are and what's happening, but that's the truth. That he's going to find them and find them very, very quickly, and that's exactly what happens, because the raid on the Shihazaikai base would be just days after the capture of Overhaul. They capture Overhaul, they invade the Shihazaikai base, and then, of course, you have Mirio and Izuku and Bakugo to easily help out and just completely destroy through this entire base. And they're able to, more or less, or at least for the most part, defeat every single villain in here relatively easily, especially with the help of the other users of One For All, in which Izuku continues to utilize, which would include someone like All Might too, which would make this whole scenario far easier than you could possibly even imagine. And this is where things in the hero world of Japan would kind of settle down, and settle down quite a bit, because Izuku, yes, would be helping out here and there, but he would definitely be more student than hero towards this point. He would continue throughout this time just getting stronger, getting better, right? Getting more training in, and he even trains with the other class by the name of Class 1B, and their training would be pretty decent. I mean, at the end of the day, he would be a lot stronger than anybody in Class 1B, but still, his fight and the showing of Shinso and so on, and it shows that the class continues to get better and better and stronger, and it seems like their progress continues to accelerate. Now, without the villains like All For One, Shigaraki, without Overhaul being, still on his overtaking leisure, and without really anyone else being an issue, there kind of is just a big lump of peace. There's a lot of time, relaxation, and also just progression for these future heroes. Years would even pass. We have 1, 2, 3, all the way up until their third years, and Izuku is already put on this pedestal of being that #1 hero. He's still working with Sir Night-Eye's agency. He's still working with people like Mirio and everyone else, but even Sir Night-Eye's agency kind of changes massively, because Mirio is kind of put on the forefront and kind of takes over. Mirio is one of the top heroes already, especially after getting out of UA, and he continues to kind of push forward in what he's doing. Mirio continues to show and show why he's so good at what he does and so good at being a hero. But the up-and-coming Izuku Midoriya and also even Katsuki Bakugo is putting a threat to basically the level that Mirio may be at. Mirio was on track at one point to being the #1 hero, even scratching the surface of being that hero specifically. But now with Izuku and Bakugo on the rise, Bakugo a little bit less than Izuku, but Izuku as that knight, as the spectral knight, as the almighty knight, it seems as if Izuku is going to be taking his place quicker than you could possibly even imagine. And as time would go by, and as they would finally enter the hero space, it seems like Izuku's effect on the world, not just Japan, but even the world, would be as much as even All Might, being that he does carry the past users of One For All with him, and it seems as if he continues to carry on the legacy of what All Might was showing. And of course, there are going to be villains, there are going to be people, there are going to be corrupt people in the near future, but Izuku himself, in the knight in shining armor, is truly the knight and also the protector that Japan now needs and now deserves. With All For One dethroned, with all the villains subsided, and with the failure of All For One's successor, Shigaraki, now in the gutter, it seems like prison, death, or just safety is pretty close in terms of the lack of villains. It seems as if the villainy has slowed down to a point where All Might made it look, or the point where All Might made it look pretty conceivable, and it seems as if they continue their journey throughout hero work, and whatever's to come, whatever villains show their face and whatever challenges await Izuku Midoriya with his sword and shield and with his ability and his true noble and his honor, it seems like he'll be able to fend it off to a large degree, because Izuku Midoriya is the true almighty knight, and Izuku Midoriya is soon to be the true #1 hero and Japan's next savior. But that might be the end of this story, but not the end of what truly is going to occur for Izuku Midoriya. Now, with that said, this is where the story ends for now, but if you enjoyed, please show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, and leave a comment down below. All that good stuff.